On Pesach night, we're going to sit by the Seder and eat matzah. Matzah is referred to as lechem oini, a poor man's bread. Yet we're also going to eat matzah leaning to the left, because we're like kings. So which one is it? Are we kings or a poor man? I'm going to answer with an amazing story I heard from Rabbi Wallerstein. A story that changed the way I think about Pesach, and I'm sure it will do the same for you. There was once a king and a queen who were beloved by their people, but unfortunately, they didn't have any children. For months, all the people in the country came together and prayed, and finally the queen had a baby boy. But when the boy was just 4 years old, he became very sick. They brought every doctor, every expert, yet no one was able to heal the child. And the king and the queen just sat by their child's bed, by the prince's bed, waiting and watching him slowly die. One day a soldier walks in and says, "Your Majesty, you know there are those savages that live in the woods? Well, when they get sick, they have a medicine man who heals them." The king says, "I have nothing to lose." A couple days later, the medicine man arrives. He has a long beard, hasn't taken a shower in months. The queen sees him and says, "Get him out of here." But the king says, "We have nothing to lose. Let him try to heal our child." The medicine man mixes together some herbs and makes a very bitter drink. He forces it down the prince's throat. The prince tries spitting it out, but he makes him swallow. And he feeds him this bitter drink every single day, twice a day, until a couple of weeks later, the prince slowly begins to speak and he completely healed. The king is so grateful and asks the medicine man, "What can I give you? Anything in the world. Say it and we'll make it happen." The medicine man tells him, "I'm a simple man. I don't eat what you eat. I don't need your things. I like living in the forest. But I don't have any children myself. And I don't want all the treatments I know to die with me. So once a week, allow me to teach your child, the prince, the treatments and medicines that I know." The king agrees, and every week the medicine man would come and teach the prince about the earth. Over time, the prince and the medicine man grew very close, and when it would get late at night and the medicine man wouldn't be able to return home, he'd stay over in the palace and sleep in the prince's room. A few years pass, and a few rebels try to figure out how they can take over the country, but they know the king is very popular, and as long as he's there, they'll never succeed. So they decide in order to take over the country, they need to get rid of the prince. Like that, once the king dies, the country is theirs. A couple of weeks later, late at night, they sneak into the prince's room and grab him while he's sleeping, tie him up, gag his mouth, and take him with them. But what they don't realize is in the corner of the room, the medicine man is sleeping, and he sees everything that happens, but he stays very quiet because he knows if he makes a sound, they won't hesitate to kill the prince. So he follows them out the window, and he follows behind and watches them board a big ship. He joins the ship too, and the ship takes them to a very far away country. When they arrive at the port, there's a slave auction, and they put up the prince to be sold as a slave. A really wealthy man comes and sees this young boy and buys him as a friend for his son. When he brings the prince home, he calls his boy and tells him, "Look, I bought you a friend." The boy looks at his father with disgust. "I didn't ask you for a friend. I don't want a friend." As they're having this conversation, the prince pipes up and says, "You know, I'm a prince. My father's a king." They start laughing at him, and this young rich boy starts hating him immediately. A few days later, the rich boy has a fantastic idea. He runs to tell his father, "Let's take that boy, the one that thinks he's a prince, and make him work in the kitchen." Working in the kitchen was hard labor, 15 hours a day. This goes on for many years, and slowly the prince forgets he's a prince. All he now knows, he's a slave that will work in the kitchen for the rest of his life. But this rich boy continues to hate the prince, and one day he comes to his father and says, "I have another great idea. Let's make that boy that thinks he's a prince marry Hilda." Now Hilda was a 40-year-old, very large, very ugly lady that nobody liked even standing next to her. The father loves this idea. The rich boy runs to the prince and tells the prince, "Hey, tomorrow you're getting married." The prince looks up, "I'm getting married? To who?" And the rich boy says, "You're getting married to Hilda." "Hilda, I'll do anything to not marry her. I'll work 20 hours a day in the kitchen." The rich boy just laughs and says, "No, tomorrow you're gonna marry Hilda." Late that night, an old man approaches the boy and tells him, "Listen, it's time to get you out of here. I've been working on this for years. It's time to take you back to your country." The prince looks at him and says, "What are you talking about? I'm a slave here." The old man, which is the medicine man, says, "No, you're a prince. Your father's a king. I'm going to take you back to your country." The prince looks at him and says, "Just leave me alone. I'm a slave, and I know it." The man begs and begs, but the prince doesn't want to listen. Finally, the man says, "Let me give you something to drink." taste it and tell me if you recognize where it's from. And he takes out a little bottle of the drink that once healed the prince and gives him a drop. The prince drinks a little and says, I know this taste. It's familiar. Give me more. I remember the last time I drank this, I was laying on a big bed. Give me more. I remember standing over me by that bed are a king and a queen. Give me more. And finally he remembers everything. And that night they escape together. They arrive back in their country and the old man walks with the prince into the castle. The king and queen are sitting in the throne room, just with their heads down, depressed and gloomy. And the old man says, Your Majesty, I have your son here. The king shrugs him off and says, Don't do this to me again. And he says, Please just look at him. And finally the king looks up, and standing before him is the prince, who looks exactly like his mother. The Nimshal is Hashem was looking for a child, and all the nations turned him down till he finally found us. But we got very sick. We ended up in Mitzrayim, and in order to save us from Egypt, he gave us matzah as a medicine, a poor man's bread, to save us. But then we ended up back in Gullus, and we've been here for so long, for 2,000 years, we no longer remember we're a prince. We got to marry to Hilda. We're married to our phones. We're married to our movies, to our shows, to our anxieties, to our depressions, to all the things that come along with a Gullus. So on Pesach, Hashem is sitting there, and He's telling us, I'm here to take you away from all your sufferings, from all your darkness. But we turn Him down and say, this is who we are. This is where we are. And He begs us, eat a little bit of matzah. Like that you'll remember where you tasted this for the first time. And as you eat matzah, remember who you truly are. Remember you're a prince.